Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time. I know that your time is super valuable, so I wanted to get this out for y'all so that you can understand what informational interviews are. Thank you for joining. My name is Dr. Gina Delgado. I'm the Director of Doctoral and Postdoctoral Life Design at the Doctoral Life Design Studio. And with me today, I have Michael Wilkinson, who is actually an engineering PhD. He's about to defend here pretty soon and he has some experience with informational interviews. So let's get started. So just to go over the agenda, we're going to go over what an informational interview is, how to find an interviewee, tips for informational interviewing, different types of questions to ask. Michael's also going to talk a little bit about his experience and what he has found with his informational interviewing journey. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the future events. So, what is an informational interview? An informational interview are one-on-one conversations that you have with professionals to gather information. Whoops, I have a typo there. To gather information. The things that you would most likely talk to them about is their career paths or the jobs they've had or the industries that they've been in, employers that they're familiar with, emerging and future trends that they see within their field, and also some of the skills that they've developed while being at their company or organization. And here's the who, when, and where. So, who are you going to be informationally interviewing? Well, first, you would have to research different titles and job descriptions in your specific field. Before I continue, I want to see who in here can, if in the chat, can you put up what you're studying or what your field is in the chat? I want to get an idea of who we got in here. Environmental engineering and chemistry, immunology. Okay, a postdoc in clinical research, earth planetary sciences. Okay, we have a variety of different backgrounds here. Perfect. Awesome. And quick question, have any of y'all, do any of y'all have experience with informational interviewing? I also want to know that about you. If you do, press yes. If not, say no. Yes. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, cool. Great. So this is probably going to be one of the most valuable things that you do with your career. Specifically because, applying to jobs is like applying, kind of blind. You don't know what the culture is. You don't know what the day-to-day looks like. And so getting this information prior to even applying to jobs, or maybe while you're applying to jobs, is really important. I mean, I'm going to share some stories about that. But the first thing that you should do is try to figure out who you want to interview. Specific to your field, research different titles and job descriptions in your field. I use LinkedIn. It's a powerful professional networking tool. And also, if you go into your professional organizations to your field, it's also a good place to start. Lots of professional organizations have job markets or job postings, but they also have different groups and organizations within their organization that you can connect with and network with other people who are like-minded and have similar backgrounds so that you can get a little bit more information about how to break into that field specifically. Now, when you should be doing that, informational interviewing is valuable at any point in time. And the earlier you can get started, the more data you can collect. And it'll make applying for jobs and making decisions a lot easier later on. Because when you look at one data analyst position, for example, or quantitative researcher position in one company, it might look completely different than in another company. So getting that information and finding those details and nuances is very important. Next, where in the world are you going to find these people? So if you can do something in person, that's awesome, right? Doing that in-person informational interview, doing a quick little coffee chat in person will always help you sharpen your own interviewing skills, right? And that conversational piece, that networking piece, but also take advantage of the fact that everything is pretty much electronic. Can you imagine how informational interviewing would be in the 90s? and how tough that would be compared to today. You can send a quick message over social media and quickly do 15 minutes with somebody and learn all about what they're about. So some things to think about before starting, right? What you want to do is you want to focus on building genuine connections. Now, with informational interviewing, it could feel transactional, right? Because you're trying to get that information out of them. But approach it to be less transactional, more relational, right? Um, Kind of giving you an example, when I was a postdoc, I was looking for postdocs, and I had found a potential postdoc at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And so I didn't know anyone there, but I went ahead and I found the PI as well as some people who were on his team. And instead of, being like, what is this about? What am I going to be doing? What is the everyday, blah, blah, blah. I actually, started talking to them a little bit more about my research experience and they kind of, it started a conversation, right? So when you're going into these interviews, think about it as more of a conversation than it is a transaction. Because what ended up happening was that not only did I get that postdoc, but also I created some really, really genuine connections that to this day, I'm still doing research with them, even though I'm not a postdoc anymore, right? And so there's a lot of connections that you can make that with networking is a good thing in a long run. Networking, think of networking as a long game, not a short game. Networking is really uh, cultivating these relationships and seeing how you can also provide some sort of value to them, right? Next is set specific goals, right? Do you know how many positions you want to apply to? If not, if you do, then how many people from that office or that organization do you want to talk to, right? Once you kind of go through the process and you've done done some informational interviews, you start to get a good number of like maybe 3 or 4 is a good amount of people at a company to interview, or maybe 2 to 3, right? Depending on what you need and how much information you get, you'll start to see kind of a trend as to how many interviews you should do to get the information that you need, right? Next, find networking events that align with your interests. And this means go to conferences, right? Go to professional organization workshops. Go to the Doctoral Life Design Studio events, right? We have events where we bring professionals from your field and they come here to talk to you specifically, right? And I thank you for the question. So put all your questions in here and we'll answer them at the end. But thank you. I enjoy that you're using the chat. And so, with conferences themselves, usually, and just to give you a little bit of an answer, a conference, I try to find conferences through professional organizations. So if there is a professional organization that the majority of people in your field are going towards, they usually have an annual conference. There's also little baby conferences that they have. If the organization is big enough, I come from a background of education, and so the organization that I use is the AERA, American Education Research Association, and they're so big that they have an annual conference, but then they have sectional conferences in different parts of the states, right? So, and then they also have smaller events happening there. And so what I do is I attend these conferences, I attend these workshops that they have, and I'm able to connect with people within my field and network in that manner. And so finding conferences is usually about going to your professional organization's page and seeing if they have like an annual conference or maybe even if they have virtual conferences as well. And then lastly, use social media to your advantage. I know LinkedIn is something that, you're like, oh, it's just something that recruiters look at, but it can be a lot more powerful than that. And I'm going to show you kind of how you can find people through LinkedIn. So to find interviewees, here's a couple of steps, and we'll go through those steps on the browser that I have open. So step 1 is you would go into your LinkedIn search bar and search for the company that you're interested. Step 2, you'd go to the company's LinkedIn page. Step 3, you would click on people, and step 4, you can use a filter to see which peoples are in what role and to see their background, to see what they study, to see how many years they've been there, right? LinkedIn is really powerful to give you an idea of how many people are in an organization, where they're coming from, what they've studied, and you can find people in that manner. So let's go ahead and do that. Actually, let's present that space. So before we go into finding people, I wanted to give you an example message, right? It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be complicated, right? Here's one right here. Hello, name. I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to reach out to introduce myself. We connected on LinkedIn recently, and I thought it would be great to get to know you better. I currently am a blank at blank, and I specialize in blank. I'm always looking to connect with other professionals in my field, and I thought you might be a great person to connect with given your experience and expertise. I'm interested in learning more about your work and your professional goals. Would love to set up a call to chat more about your career and how we might be able to support each other. Let me know if you're interested. It's short, sweet, to the point. It tells people what you need, and it's friendly, right? It's inviting. And that's kind of how you want to approach these sort of relationships. So going on to LinkedIn, can y'all see my page? Can you see it? Okay. So for example, I'm gonna have the chat. If you guys can tell me a company or an organization that you're interested in looking at, and we'll go through a couple of them. Rand. All right. So I searched Rand, right? And what you can do is you can go to Rand's page. And under Rand's page, you see these different categories here. You can click on jobs, see what kind of jobs they have available, right? But you can also click on people. And what this does is give you some information about the corporation itself. So right now on LinkedIn, there's 2,951 associated members, right? And if we're looking at where they live, where they studied, you can also look at what they do, what they're skilled at, and how you're connected, right? I usually go into, like, let's say you're looking for people who are in, let's see what they studied. Oh, where they studied. I need what they studied. So we're looking at, let's just say we're looking at mathematics, right? Let's say, oh, I'm looking for people who had studied mathematics and work at Rand. You click on mathematics, and what happens is at the bottom here, it'll send you a list of people who have experience with mathematics, have a background in mathematics. And so let's click on Alejandra Lopez right here. So Alejandra is a PhD student, a PhD candidate in public policy analysis. Oh, maybe LinkedIn doesn't do it all. Oh, there we go. She got her bachelor's from mathematics from Arizona State University, but she's currently getting her PhD in policy analysis, right? And so she would be kind of an interesting person. So if you have a background in mathematics, but you're like, wait, you have a background in mathematics, but you're doing public policy analysis, where did that career change happen? How did that happen, right? Those are really interesting questions to ask someone like Alejandra. Figuring out like what was her career path into that. If we let's look at Neuralink. With Neuralink, people, it's 484 associated members. Click on what they do, what they studied. Let's say we're going into neuroscience, right? People with background in neuroscience. Pull down here. It'll tell you exactly who is related to Neuralink and you know what their specialty is. So Miss Chelsea Lord here. If we look down here, she's part of the clinical team and she has degrees in applied data science as well as a bachelor's in neuroscience, right? So even though we're all at PhD level, it'll be a lot easier if you go through. And let's say you want to find people with PhD. So I'm just going to put PhD in, and now there's six people with a PhD, right? That came up in the search. We have Michael Anthony Brito, who's a neuroscientist at Neuralink. And if we look at their journey here, LinkedIn gives you a really good outlook. If they filled it out, gives you a really good outlook of what their journey was right here. Going through their history would give you some ideas of what kind of questions you want to ask, right? So they have a doctor of philosophy in neuroscience from the University of Michigan. And this would be a good candidate if you're thinking, oh, like, how did you get this position? Or did you talk to anybody coming into this? What was part of your application, right? Let's go back to Rand and see if we can find some PhDs. There's 137 associated members, right? So we have Mr. Ido Levy, obviously Alejandra Lopez as well. So these are just people who have a PhD or getting a PhD. This person has a Doctor of Philosophy International Relations, right? But they still work at Rand. Thinking about people who are near what you're trying to study is great. That's great. But I also encourage you to kind of explore other people who work there to see what they did to be able to get there as well. The more information you get, the better you can synthesize that data so that you understand, where are my openings? Where does this fit along with what my plan is, right? And all you'd have to do is just send them a quick little message on here, right? Especially with the small little message that I did. You have the ability to send them a message. Now, what if they don't respond, right? There are millions of people out there. I usually follow up about a week to 2 weeks after I send the message if I haven't followed up. What I do is I just say, hey, just wondering if you're still open to doing something like this. If they don't respond, move on, right? There are millions of other people where you can get that information from. And plus on top of that, some people might not use LinkedIn as much as you do, as much as other people do, right? So to be able to find people there, that's really, really powerful. Another way to do that is, like, for example, can anyone name a professional organization that you go to conferences to and that we can go look at? IEEE. All right. So on the professional organizations page, there's a lot of information that you can also get. For example, they have their communities. Here is where you would have conferences, right? Upcoming conferences. So you'll know kind of where you would go network. Ooh, apparently not. Okay, I went to a search bar. Let's go over here. Conferences. Right. So even with this, you'll be able to kind of, oh, this is for 2023. Even with this, what you can do is you can find the people who presented at these conferences and even ask them, especially if they're really related to what you're studying and what you are trying to get into. That's a great way of finding people who are experts in your field to start to get to know about their career path and how and where they landed, right? Going through a conference list, that's what I'm trying to find at this point in time. Let's see. Oh my God, this one's going to be in Hawaii. That sounds fantastic. Actually, it was in Hawaii, right? So here we go. Here's a list of people that are in this conference that you'll be able to either find on LinkedIn or maybe Google them to see if they at their university, they have an email where you can do that as well. So finding people is pretty easy. It's the interviewing piece that we're going to get into. The same thing that can be done with connecting with alumni. So when you go onto LinkedIn, Johns Hopkins University has their webpage, and you click on alumni. When you click on alumni, you can use the filters to find different alumni in different places. So not only can you find people just by finding them, you can also target previous PhDs at Johns Hopkins. Do we want to go ahead and do that, or was the previous self-explanatory? I don't want to take up much of your time. Do we want to go ahead and see what that looks like? Might as well. Let's do that. So on the Johns Hopkins website, or LinkedIn page, I should say, we click on alumni. 140,000 people on here, right? And you can go through to see where they live, what they do, what they study, right? If we're gonna, let me look at the chat real quick to see what we put in. Let's go with mechanical engineering. Do they have anything with engineering here? Just electrical, electronics engineering, bioengineering. Let's just stick with it. Let's just stick with electrical electronics engineering. All right. So if you want to find alumni that there's 6,207 alumni here. And it also tells you where they work. Majority of them are at Northrop, but we also have people at the Applied Physics Lab, at Raytheon, Boeing, Booz Allen, Google, right? So you can even Google. Let's look at people with Google. So what you do is, here we go, right here. We have some of these people will already be PhD, they're current PhDs. So you have to be careful to see if they've already graduated or not. Sometimes, like for example, this one says PhD at Johns Hopkins. I'm assuming they're still they're still a candidate here at Johns Hopkins. But let's go with Chong. See, what part, if we're looking at this profile, I immediately see that he might not be someone that I might want to talk to because of the fact that their activity, they haven't posted in a long time. And then on top of that, they do have, a PhD from electrical engineering from Johns Hopkins, and it says that they've been at Google for 3 years. But other than that, it looks like their profile isn't really interactive with, right? So if you were to send them a message, it might just send it to their inbox, but they might not ever see it because they might not be interacting with their own page, right? So definitely take note of who has been interacting on LinkedIn and who can provide, who can be a little bit, can give you some more deeper information, because we don't want to waste time with emailing people who aren't on LinkedIn, or maybe they just check it once a month. You know what I mean? MBEE. Let's see, I'm looking at. Oh, thank you, Michael, by the way. Thank you. So searching MBEE. Let's search for MBEE. You only see 10 alumni, Lalitha? Gotcha. So that might be something that, it ends up being that not a lot of MBEE alumni end up having a LinkedIn account, right? Something for what they study. Sorry. So it might be something that there might not be that many that are on LinkedIn, right? I would definitely at least still use that 10 alumni to see what that looks like. So let's see. Can you can you tell me exactly what MBEE is so I don't assume? Because that's not good to do.
Hi, sorry. It's me, Lalita. So It's so long to type, so I just wanted to say it's a master's in biotech, enterprise and entrepreneurship, but it's abbreviated for MBEE. It's like MBA, but everyone just puts MBEE. I don't know why. This program has been out for 10 years here, and when I
Mm,
immediately look it up, if they've been to Hopkins before, it shows that they've done MBEE, but I don't
mm.
know why in this type of search it's not coming up.
Interesting.
And
See, only
Gina,
one person came up
I
for
was
me. Yes.
Oh, so one thing I was saying in the chat is sometimes I've noticed on LinkedIn, it's actually more like you'll get more hits if you go to like where they studied, hit that little plus and then enter it there instead of entering it in like the general search bar, because I think the general search bar is looking at like what's on their main profile page. So if you do like, yeah, what they studied add, sometimes like those majors will pop up.
Mm,
I don't know if
yes.
abbreviated majors will pop up or not, but so long as like whatever they listed on their LinkedIn as their major, presumably they'd spell out the full thing, but not sure.
Let's try that out.
Um,
I just wanted to refresh it so that it was I don't understand what's going on here. See how it used to say 140 and now it's only 6,000?
hmm.
So what we're doing, and let's see. There we go. I reset it back. BE. Ooh, Michael, you think that's
So I think it has to like they had to have written it like that in their profile. So then you might actually need to like if you maybe type like biotech, it might pop up. Because I think it depends on like what people actually, yeah, like biotechnology. So you might find it there. Because I think it depends on like how LinkedIn would save it basically when people put their major.
right? And then from here, teen alumni, right? So we got a little bit more than the 10 that we saw here.
Yeah,
Mr. Tevin Ali. Wow, he's a national award-winning speaker. He might be someone that you might want to talk to, right?
right.
Um, and so I would encourage you to actually talk to someone like this because they not only are they speaker, but they might be an expert in some of these things that, they might have connections that they can connect you to as well, right? It's not just connecting with one person. If you end up hitting it off with someone, they might introduce you to their network. And that's how it kind of grows. And it's happened to me as well. That's happened a lot
Okay,
when doing informational interviews, right?
okay.
So this is very definitely a useful tool to be able to use. And Mingyu, you said, how can we see if this is an active individual on LinkedIn? So let's go with Tevin Ali right here. If we want to assess kind of like previous profile that we were looking at, there was really there was no about me, there was no previous posts, there was no comments, anything of that. So it tells me that that person isn't really invested in being on LinkedIn, right? So it might not be someone that you want to talk to. But we're looking at Tevin here, and Tevin, they have services, they have features, their activity right here, their posts. They just post 2 weeks ago, right? Um, then they have all of their experience in great detail as to what they've done, right? So this to me tells me that this is a very engaged user and that you would have a higher chance of connecting with this person because they have so many things on their profile to offer compared to the other one where they didn't have anything. It was just their picture and where they were, right? So if we're going to go with alumni, if you're looking at messaging alumni, here is, and I'm going to be sending out these slides to everyone as well. So, so when you're messaging some alumni, you can say, hey, hello. I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to reach out to introduce myself. We connected on LinkedIn recently. Thought it would be great to know you better. I am a first year, second year, etc. student at Johns Hopkins at the School of blah, currently in training for PhD in blah. I saw that you also graduated at Johns Hopkins University with the same degree. I'm really interested in learning more about how you navigated your career after receiving your PhD from Johns Hopkins, especially around transitioning from academia to industry. Let me know if you have some time to chat soon. And Alumni, actually, I've worked at 4 different universities. Johns Hopkins, from my experience right now, is that they have such engaged alumni. Alumni tend to actually want to talk, that's been way different than the other universities I've been. And I've noticed that alumni not only are engaged, but they're willing to be sources of knowledge and sources of connection. So I encourage you to, reach out to alumni and see what they're about because you never know. You never know. That's the biggest takeaway from today. You never know who you're gonna meet. That's gonna change the direction or the career or just gonna give you that information you need to get to the next level, right? So some tips for informational interviewing, right? Now, always research ahead of time. Learn about the person that you're interviewing, about their company, study the profile and the company's profile. And this shows respect for their time and helps you ask more specific questions instead of staying a little bit more general, right? Next, use your active listening skills, right? Pay close attention to their answers, ask questions based on what they say, show that you're engaged and interested. You're not just there to collect information, you're there to make a connection. Ask them, it never harms anything to ask them like, hey, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite cut? What are you into? What are your hobbies? How does your life look like outside of working? What is your work-life balance, right? Those are kind of questions that you ask that kind of also hint to someone else that you want to have a deeper connection. I want to know more about you. And people want to talk about themselves. They want to talk about what they're interested. So really lean on that. Next, prepare your questions. We'll go over a list of questions, but have a list of questions ready. Focus on their career path, their industry, their company culture, and any advice that they might have for someone entering in the field, right? If also, this is also another thing is take into account where they are in the position of what position they have in the organization you're looking at, right? Someone might be entry level. So if you're interviewing someone who's entry level, right, they might have a really good viewpoint as to what they recently did to get into that organization. If you're going to be interviewing someone who's like a director or somebody who might be a possible supervisor later on, you're going to get more information about their experience being at that organization and like what their day-to-day looks like and what trends they've seen, right? So depending on the position that they're in the company, you're going to get different types of information. And lastly, follow up. Make sure that you thank them for your time, but also let them know that it helped you out with your career exploration and job hunt. This keeps the relationship positive and ongoing. I have students that actually have connected with me because they want to go into higher education. They want to do what I'm doing now, right? And they will message me on LinkedIn, asking me for informational interviews and that sort of thing. But they also send me like, hey, I just published, or hey, I just accomplished this. I just did this, video. I just wanted to keep you updated on what I'm doing. That's normal in LinkedIn world, and that's normal when it comes to creating your network, right? Keeping people updated on what you're doing. If you feel that you make a genuine connection with someone, don't be afraid to be like, hey, I just wanted to update you on what I'm doing, right? Because in this case, it's the long game. We're looking at creating relationships for a longer purpose than just that one point of interaction. So, what are some sample questions that you can have for an informational interview? Some of these are very typical, but they can get very specific depending on who you're talking to. So, how did you get started in your field? What does a typical day in your job look like? What are some of the most important skills or qualities for success in your field? What do you enjoy most about your job? What are some challenges you face at work? And what advice do you have for someone who's interested in pursuing a career in this field? We could also go into the specific resources or organizations that they can recommend for someone who's, learning more about that industry. You can also ask them to recommend any other people that you can talk to within the organization to continue collecting more information. And also, do you have any advice for someone who's looking to break into the industry? right? These are all very simple sample questions. They can get a little bit more specific depending on who you're talking to. So I'm gonna have Mr. Michael GT Wilkinson. He's gonna kind of go over kind of some of his experiences with informational interviewing. Let me stop my screen and I'll let you share.
Oh, okay. You want me to share screen?
Yeah.
Can do. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So can y'all see my slides? Okay, cool. So yeah, I want to talk about my story a bit with informational interviewing, and this is coming from an engineer who did not want to go into academia. I found myself very quickly in a situation. So I'm in my 6th year of my PhD. I'm hopefully graduating in December. We'll see, assuming my defense goes well. But you know, when I would talk, I went in originally kind of being unsure if do I want to go into academia, do I want to go into industry, like a lot of engineers do. And everyone around me, a lot of them were heading toward the path of academia. My advisor mainly was in the path of academia, right? So there were some folks I knew who were in industry, but not a ton. So I found myself kind of having to, you know, do a bit of the legwork to figure out like what do I want to do and what is even out there. So with the first thing I started with is just questioning my future path is I just started exploring what's out there. One of the things that Gina mentioned in her presentation, right, is attending like these like professional, what's up, Gina?
Question. Did you press present?
Okay, I did. So this is why I'm wondering if it's not actually sharing my screen
Ah,
properly.
okay, because we just see the slides,
Okay.
but we don't. There we go. Perfect. Got it.
Okay. No worries. Sorry about that. But yeah, so I knew I didn't want to go into academia. I started exploring what else is out there. Like what Gina was talking about, you know, the DLDS hosts all these professional panels. There's other organizations that host all these professional panels, right? You know, I know like for example, there's like a biotech group over on the med campus that they'll sometimes do like have people come in and do informational panels. So I just kind of started attending these things on my own just as like a hey, what else is even out there, right? So like for example, I attended like the career consulting day back when the LDS was called Futures. Wasn't even sure consulting was a thing. Like I didn't even really know what it was. But once I attended that event, like I learned quite a lot about it. Same thing for like this applying to government career jobs is something like I'd heard of in passing, but like really understanding what's out there. And then in general, like talking to my network of connections like that you know were in these various fields like medical robotics like I have pictured there, just kind of you know spread out all over the place. I started with just like before even doing informational interviewing on specific positions or specific companies, I started just broadly attending these things to understand like what is even available to me as someone with a PhD in mechanical engineering. And the nice thing, and kind of what Tajina mentioned, is as I attended these events and as I met the professionals at these events, I also like built that connection, that professional connection, so that later, once I felt like, okay, I have an idea of what all these fields are, I'm ready to start actually asking folks about like you know, their roles in it and like any guidance. I can leverage the connections I had made at all these events, right, to start actually communicating with folks. Um, so from there, I basically just, you know, started by asking folks who are in those fields. So one of the things I started with, as opposed to like looking for a specific company, let's say, right? Like we did. I would sometimes just start with like generally like, okay, who are some alumni from the School of Engineering that are in consulting, right? I could also narrow it down just by like mechanical engineering. Like when I like, for example, when I went on LinkedIn, and that helped quite a bit because typically what would happen is like I would talk to one person who was in consulting generally, and they were a wealth of information of like the other companies that exist and the other kinds of companies that exist, right? People they know from those companies, which made it a lot easier than to like hop around and start asking folks in specific companies instead of just saying like, okay, I know KPMG is a consulting company. Maybe I should try to like reach out to someone there directly. On LinkedIn, it tells you like how many connections removed you are from someone. So I just kind of started with like who in consulting do I have like already have a connection with, or like am just kind of one step removed, right? Because those are going to be the folks most likely willing to actually talk to me, right? So that was extremely advantageous. I also used OneHop, which is this kind of like mentoring community, right? There was a person there who did government research that I was super interested in. So I connected with them. And the nice thing with OneHop is they're specifically on that website to be mentors, right? So there is not like you hopefully shouldn't get ghosted. I think they have like a very, very high connection and follow-up rate. And then I also just use like the network, like I said, I built whether like at these events or through other things. Some of you might know that like the Futures Office did like this 100 Alumni Voices podcast, right? I was one of the podcast hosts for that. So I interviewed like all these different people, and some of them were in fields that I was interested in. Some of them came from engineering, right? So I messaged them, if I had their email or LinkedIn, like I'd message them and say, hey, I know you from this thing that we did together. It was really a pleasure talking to you. I'd love to know more about like your work, your field, and like your specific company, right? Do you have time to talk? And almost always for all of these folks, they were all willing to have like just a 30-minute quick informational interview. To Gina's point, before I went into each one of these interviews, I'd always have like a list of questions ready, right? Because like I didn't want to go in and waste their time and waste my time. I found that extremely helpful. And often what I found is like I would ask a question that I thought was maybe a bit specific, but to them it was much more general and they'd expand out on it quite a bit. So like when I was talking to when the first person I talked to in consulting who worked at McKinsey, and I just generally asked like, what is like the work-life culture of consulting like, right? And I thought very specific question. Turns out there's a whole bunch of different kinds of consultings, right? So then she started rattling off, well, if you're in like management consulting, it's like this, and this. If you're in just like direct like boutique consulting or engineering consulting, right? So it was super helpful, not just learning about her company and her background, but then like this wealth of knowledge. And that gave me quite a lot of background and confidence to start applying for roles, right? To start following up with people as I was applying for roles. One of the things that was mentioned in that slideshow is getting started as early as possible. And I could not agree with that more, especially because depending on the field you're going into, the hiring timelines are really, really long. So if you are interested in something like consulting, they have like over a year long hiring timeline, right? So really you got to be started applying to them a year before you're going to graduate, which means you probably have had to talk to someone like a year and a half before you graduate, right? If you're going into government work, they have like 8-month hiring timelines. They have really long hiring timelines, right? Some industries are super, super quick, some are not. So that's kind of, and even like in the academic route, like sometimes like it takes a while to get land a postdoc, like even if people want you on board, they might not have funding for another year. So, you're also kind of like applying for postdocs pretty early, right? So the earlier that you can start doing this kind of thing and start communicating with people, the better. And I found if I had to give it like a systematic structure and how I did it, I think first just like learning about the field that you're interested in and the specifics, however you can learn it, right? Whether it's like looking it up, whether it's attending these events, whether it's talking to like your direct colleagues or like their direct colleagues like in the field, right? Once I did that, then I felt comfortable reaching out to folks within that field generally, to say, hey, like I'm interested in exploring this field. I know a little bit about it, but like I love to talk to you more about it because I felt like if I just went in and said, "Hey, I know absolutely nothing. I have not looked into this whatsoever. I've not made any sort of attempt to find out about my own. Can you tell me everything you know?" I felt like that probably wouldn't land as well as, "Hey, I've actually done some of the background. I've actually done some of like the exploring for myself, and it's just a really dense thing, and I don't know a whole lot about it." Um, Another important thing that with LinkedIn specifically that you might run into is that a lot of folks, you can't actually message them until you connect with them. So when you are connecting with folks, you have the option of like writing a message as you connect. Granted, that message I think is like 200 characters, so it's pretty limited. Not like that full kind of like paragraph that you saw in the earlier introduction. So what I would do in that case, I would kind of do like an abbreviated version of what you saw in that introduction. I can put in the chat like an example that I gave for someone when I was like interested in KPMG. So it's just something like, and I knew this person was an alumni. I knew that they were from engineering. I knew that they specifically had a mechanical engineering degree from Hopkins, right? So I said, hello, I'm finishing up my PhD in Mech E at the end of 2024. I'm interested in engineering consulting and found KPMG because this is where this person was from, right? I would appreciate speaking with you more about it. And that was like literally the exact character limit almost that I had in that connection request. But I think like they got back to me pretty quickly. And I think because it wasn't just like random connection, it was connection with a purpose that they were willing to get back to me so quickly. And I've connected with quite a lot of folks and spoken to quite a lot of folks doing this kind of thing. Sometimes you get lucky and you can just direct message people on LinkedIn or like whatever, like One Hop, for example, you can just direct message people. But if you don't get lucky and you have to like do the whole connection rigmarole, I found that this was the easiest way basically to like make a meaningful connection. And a lot of these folks, to Gina's point, like it wasn't just this kind of transactional thing. I kept in touch with a lot of them. I've actually recruited a bunch of them to do like various like events for the DLDS office. As far as their response rate, it kind of depended on if like I knew them like through various connections or not. So if I was going into it where, I had a lot of connections that we shared in common or that like I was directly connected to already, usually it was like probably like a 9 out of 10 response rate, right? It was really high if like I was a near direct connection or like I had already known them. When it was, I didn't really have any connections to them. I didn't really know them super well. Something like that. It was probably closer to like a 50-50 rate. Sometimes folks would be like very quick in getting back to me. A lot of people, to Gina's point, like don't check their LinkedIn, aren't active on LinkedIn. So I'd often get like a month later, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I never checked my LinkedIn. Thank you for reaching out. Absolutely, I'd love to talk, blah, 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 right? So sometimes it's not like they see it and they're ignoring you. It's just that some people don't like monitor their LinkedIn enough to even notice that that came in. But that's a good question. So yeah, I think that leveraging your immediate network first is probably like the easiest way to ensure that you can talk to folks, because it is a bit harder when you're reaching out kind of like in the void, basically. So, um, so I say all of this, and you're like, okay, that's great. So how did that turn out? Well, I actually, through all of this, I actually did get a job, which is, not easy in the market these days. So I landed a government job. This was one that like even just navigating USA jobs, if you've never done that before, is a nightmare, right? So like learning from current government employees on like how they did it, right? Especially the ones that were doing the kinds of things that I was interested in, where they were generally located and things like that. So all of that gave me the confidence to apply for these jobs, even if like I didn't directly know someone in that field. So like I applied, one of the places I applied that I got the job was the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton. I didn't actually know anyone who worked there, right? So there was no like leveraging that. But I had talked to enough government employees at that point where I felt pretty confident in just like applying for a government job. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my journey. If there's any other questions on that, I'm happy to share, but I kind of want to just give you like from someone who's gone through it a bit and now actually has a job, what that process looked like for me outside of just like these slides, basically.
Thank you, Michael. That was really insightful. Let me go ahead and go back to what we were talking about. Yes, thank you. That was so valuable, honestly. And you know what? Let's open up the floor to questions for any of us. Any questions about approaching people? Any questions about, you know, how do I even like break that ice? Like anything like that? Anyone have any questions or comments? Put it in the chat. And while we're waiting for those questions, I do want to let y'all know that I have a couple next events. We have crafting winning resumes for doctoral and postdoctoral scholars. That's going to be next week, the 22nd. Dr. Rojni Rao, who is the Assistant Vice Provost of the Doctoral Elect Design Studio, will be hosting that. And so she is a vault of knowledge when it comes to this. She's been doing this for a while as well. So she'll be able to help with crafting the winning resume for anybody who is interested in either going into academia or industry, right? The next thing is prepping for behavioral and situational interviews, right? So let's just say you've done your informational interviews. You've done your informational interviews. You've found people that you've talked to. You're like Michael. You're like, I feel like I could just apply to this now that I know what I need to know, right? So in this particular event, we're going to be concentrating on the questions that are used, specifically behavioral and situational questions. And so with those, like how they could be anything of like, can you tell me a time when you were under pressure? Or they can give you a situation like in this situation, you have this, this, and this. What are you going to do in this piece? Can you outline how you're going to do it? So I have a lot of different strategies to use for behavioral and situational interviews. I hope that I see you there. And let's see who's in the chat right now. How do you prep questions to show that you've done your research on the company or person? So for example, if you go to someone's profile and you notice that they've been at that particular company for a while, maybe you see that they've gone up the ranks in that company, right? So I would focus on those questions of like, I see that within this time frame on your LinkedIn, you were at this position and then you went to this position. What made you do that switch, or what was it that got you to that next level, right? That's how you can start creating questions for them, is kind of looking at their profile. If you're finding people, like for example, on a professional organization web page, or they don't have like a very big presence online, what you can do is, definitely stick with more the generic questions, right? You can start extracting that information, and as you're talking to them, you can get a little bit more detailed from there, right? So prepping those questions, to do, and also go to the company's website and go find their vision, find their mission, find what they're doing, what are the current initiatives that they're doing, right? And you can ask those particular employees, or in your interview, this is, I saw that you guys are doing this. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? So just, doing that little bit of research prior can be very impactful within the information. Yes, the slides are going to be shared afterwards. I'll be sending that in email to everybody. Lalitha, to sign up to get more info on events that are coming up, we have our website, the Doctoral Elect Design Studio, on imagine.jhu.edu. I'll put that in here as well. And we're also, the next slide also actually has some information. There you go. There you go. So you can also email us at doctoralectdesign@jh.edu. We're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube. This particular recording will also be on YouTube later on. And so if you want to come to all those events, I hope I see you there, because why not? Why not? It's only going to be good for you, right? And then here we go. We have a question for Michael.
Sure. Thank you for the question. And so, yeah, how did I manage to balance all of these various things that I do? So I will say that in general, with like the time management of these things, it kind of depended on like what stage of my dissertation or like my research I was in, right? Like now that I'm kind of in like the home stretch of writing my dissertation, I'm certainly not doing like a million other things. But in general, I found that doing a lot of these other things are kind of what kept me sane enough to continue doing my research. Like sometimes I'd talk to my advisor about a thing I was doing, and I kind of just stopped telling them all the things I were doing, because every time it's like, well, that's not research. And I think what folks struggle to understand is like having all these extracurriculars that you enjoy is kind of what also motivates you to keep doing research. But in general, yeah, as far as time management, like making sure that you're, knocking out the tasks that you have to do within a given week. I like to keep like task lists so that I can kind of like manage everything. I kind of live and die by my like Outlook calendar. So I think that's kind of the way that I managed all of that. But don't be afraid to explore stuff outside of your research if it's things that you find very interesting. And if you start informational interviewing early, you don't have to worry about being bogged down with it at the end. So that's kind of one way to do that is like do it as early as you can, build those connections as early as you can, and then you don't have to worry about like doing that within the last couple of months of your PhD or postdoc.
And Lalitha, that's a great question. Sometimes our events are actually specific for PhDs and postdocs, but we welcome everyone to come to these yes, because you'll get some really good information as well. And so the Life Design Lab is the professional development organization on Johns Hopkins for students who are getting their masters. The Doctoral Life Design Studio is specific to people who have their PhD or are doing a postdoc, just to clear that up. But I welcome whoever because you can get some really good information in any of these events. All right. Well, here is y'all been getting emails from me. And so you'll be getting this information from me via email. I'll also post this on YouTube. So thank you everyone for joining me. You can go back to your awesome lives now, and hopefully this gives you some information. The slides will be available. I'll be sending them out on Monday. I have a conference that I have to go to this next day or so, but I'll be sending that information out to y'all. So please keep a lookout for that. Keep a lookout for all the other events. If you go to imagine.jhu.edu, they have the Doctoral Life Design Studio has its own page where you can see all of our calendar events, and we have events for every single type of background. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Have a good day.